I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. Here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast.
We talked about in a previous episode who is a contributor via buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod that she's like, hey, Matt, where are the women? Why is it always the men's voice here? So we're here. I was able to get a great female voice on Sobriety. I have Colbi. Colbi, what is your social tag? I'll put it in the notes here.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on TikTok at Collect the Similarities, which ties into my sobriety, actually. Otherwise, just Colby.
Awesome, Colby. I'll put that link in there. It is an awesome account. Although I would say you gear your message primarily for women. You have a live most nights at about 5 Central Time. I'll jump in there sometimes because I just like to see your energy. Colby, welcome to the Sober Friends Podcast.
Thank you. Humbly, thank you so much.
You posted something on social saying, I'm scared, but I said yes. What has you scared? You do these live things all the time. How is this different?
You know what's so interesting? So I'm a teacher by trade, and kids are my forte. Kids, elementary in general. So when I'm in front of children, I feel like I'm in my lane. And I found that to be true too in the rooms of 12-step. Even talking in front of adults at times can make me feel less than. And so I never want to let anybody down or disappoint. And so I hope right before I came on, I kind of connected with some of the defects that happened to rise out of me and just really humbly asking that I just speak my truth and hopefully can help the next person, whoever that may be. So I always feel a little scared, but once we get into it, we'll be great.
Oh my goodness, there's nothing to be scared about. There's tens of people listening right now. So I want to dig in a little bit on this. The less than. Like you're talking to kids. Kids are the toughest audience. You feel right at home and comfortable. But you said if you raise your hand in a 12-step meeting, you're less than?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. I think there's such a solidarity for me through the lens of kids. As a kid who was always yearning to be seen, I'm a chronic middle child. And so as a child, I always just wanted to be seen and to be heard. And when I became an elementary lens teacher, those were like my first set of people. They were like my first exhale. The idea that I could empower them to feel seen, to feel believed in was a gift of a lifetime. And that replicated for me genuinely when I walked into my first 12-step program. People started sharing around me. And I remember, I describe it as a deep exhale. I describe it as that place where it's like, oh my gosh, it's not just me. And for much of my life, I always wondered, what is wrong with me? Why do I have these intense feelings? Why is disassociation so much part of me? Why are there parts of me that I loathe and feel like I have to hide? And I walked into 12-step and realized, A, I'm not alone, but also B, I'm not that special. These are actually just really normal feelings that I just didn't know how to handle. And so, yes, in front of children, that is my first niche, I live for making them feel like somebody.
So it sounds like a lot of this came from you didn't feel seen. So you gravitated towards those people to make them feel seen. So in your own pain, you found a way to channel that towards, I'm going to help other people.
200%. I always go back to, and I didn't know these ideas until I became a teacher, but the difference between fitting in and belonging are actually vastly different. And for much of my life, and this was nothing that my parents ever wanted for me. They did not curate this idea in me that I had to fit in places. But I always felt like I was, like the 12-stepper in the big book we'll talk about is wearing paper masks. That felt like much of my entire upbringing. is I was really good at code switching. I could go into one group of friends and fit, and I could go into my church or organization and fit, or hang out with whoever and I could fit. And it wasn't until I was able to carve out my own elementary room where I really experienced kids finding belonging. And I can't say that much into my adulthood, I actually felt like I belonged in a lot of peer and social groups. I think that was what alcohol did for me. It allowed me to morph, it allowed me to fit. And then I found 12 step at literally the lowest point in my life. And it was in that moment that I was like, here is where I belong. And if I could give anyone that the hope of belonging is so alive, because I know that's what 12 step gave to me.
I kind of want to explore this whole fit versus belong. If I'm hearing you, it sounds as though you said you fit within a bunch of social groups, but I'm kind of hearing more of you conformed. Like you found a way to be silly putty to like, I'm a square peg, but I will find a way to round myself out. Even that's.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I think when it comes to like who I really am, that was the hardest realization for me at 35 when I first got sober. I was like, you know, you peel back all the layers in which you've applied to fit or morph or adapt. And then I knew what I believed, but I had no idea how those resonated on who I am. Like, actually, these are the things I believe. These are the things people told me I am. Who am I and how? And I still feel like, you know, the dust is still kind of scattering and clearing 3.5 years later. And I'm just now making bold moves to say yes, that to like stand in the identity that I choose. And yes, square peg, round hole, black sheep, whatever you want to call it, that was much of my identity, of course.
This is something I can really identify with everything you've said. I'm an only child. So in a sense, I'm the oldest, middle, and youngest.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't know if I ever felt like I fit in. I felt like I had to find a way to fit in.
Yeah.
But never belonged. And I definitely, this is a trigger for me when I don't feel seen to this day.
Same.
And like, I got home, I had a very long weekend. I took my son to volleyball. It was a 6-hour drive to Pennsylvania and 6 hours back. And I was exhausted, but everybody's going about the house and I'm watching stuff on TV by myself. And I'm like, I don't feel seen because everybody's going, just like, can somebody sit down with me for 10 minutes and watch a show with me?
Yeah. Isn't that so real? I think for me specifically, mine comes through the acknowledgement, not even that my feelings are real. I'm very fortunate to have a spouse that is normal, whatever that means. He doesn't need a 12-step program to have emotional sobriety. He really doesn't. And for me, I don't even necessarily need the acknowledgement of like the things I've done, but more the acknowledgement of the feelings I feel. Because usually everything snowballs after the feelings I feel. So no matter if it's exhaustion or whatever it could be. But you know, we've been married now. We'll be married this June 12 years. And so 9 of which I was active. And I wasn't at the height. I mean, my height, and the big book will talk about this, is like women, it happens so quickly. And for me and my experience, that could not have been more true. But like my husband and I, when we met, we both were drinking. We were both social drinkers. However, those like, you know, turned phrases. For me, it was never social. It was always something much deeper. But so you have to, for me, I have to think like my husband and I have a very paved path on how relationships and feelings work. And so I can't possibly find it rational in 3.5 years that.
What do you mean by that? A paved path?
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, I always say this with the students, and like a lot of the trauma work I've done is like neurons that fire together, wire together. So a lot of the pathways in which I act and react, I've had to rewrite through sobriety because many of the ones I naturally went to did not serve me. Because if they did, I wouldn't have made the choices that I made to not feel feelings and handle life on life's terms. So, yeah, much of the way my husband and I act and interact and react in the marriage that we knew really has like taken a lot of shifting and a lot of evolving. And thankfully, we're both really headstrong and dedicated to the cause because it's not easy work. It's not easy work to kind of like scratch the slate clean and rewrite that it takes a lot of effort. At least for us, it does. So
I'd say that's probably pretty normal. And
yeah.
I'd say you're probably pretty fortunate. If he's a normie,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case with a lot of people. And there are people I know got sober with a spouse in active addiction and they still found a way to stay sober. That's hard. It's fun.
Yes, I have met those people as well. And what an amazing testimony that is.
So tell me a little where you're comfortable so people can identify. What's the drinking story look like?
Yeah. So I do remember, people will go back when I hear stories in rooms, and man, that's part of collect the similarities is one of my biggest passions. My sponsor, I will get to your question, I promise, Matt. When I first got sober, my sponsor told me, she was like, if you're looking for differences, you're looking to drink. You'll have a drink in your hand before the night's over. Don't sit in these rooms and look for all the ways that your disease doesn't exist. You have a disease that tells you you don't have a disease. And that has stayed on my heart. So I carry notebooks with me to every 12 step. I have a bunch lined up on these shelves actually, and literally collect the similarities in people's stories and their approach and their actions and reactions. So much of the stories that I do get the experience to hear, people will date all the way back to that first drink. And I feel like much of my teenage life, I won't say it's normal. I don't know what's normal, but for me, I was very much code switching with the group I hung out with. I was very fortunate. I had a beautiful like tribe of friends in a sense. They didn't do anything that I also wasn't doing, right? And so I do remember those drinks. From the beginning, I was a blackout drinker. That I can mark. My first time I drank, many of the times after in my early teens, I never knew when to stop. I didn't know then that that was a great marker. But if I had one, I had a million. And I would go until I blacked out, not until I like fell asleep and put myself to bed. That wasn't a thing. So anyway, I had much of like the adolescent social drinking, as I I do air quotes because I didn't know it wasn't just social drinking. I had my husband and I got married. I had my first daughter and hit postpartum like a brick wall. Up until that point, I had lived I would have like seasons of depression, and I definitely have an anxious predisposition since early childhood. But postpartum really was so painful for me. I was really fortunate. I had great support in my first postpartum through my sisters and some other friends at the time I was really close to. Came out of that fog and realized that alcohol gave me a lift to ease my mind. So that would look like starting to drink like on a Thursday night. Like we're almost done with the, work week. And then that would go into Friday and then Saturday. By Sunday, I was back in teaching mode. Monday. And, at the time, and even still now, I know that's many people's code. They have this like, it's the weekend, we're celebrating. I got pregnant with my second, and what I identified as like terrible postpartum with my first was magnified even worse with my second. It was a very tough time in my life that included a lot of dark spots. I had people willing to help. I was unwilling to take the help because of my mental state. And so my solution at that time became a drink. And I can't say that it ever served me, but it's all that I knew. So from there, it escalated very quickly. I went from drinking, beer was my drink of choice. I went from drinking on the weekends to drinking every work night. Then I have summers off. I'm a teacher. So what went from weekends and weeknights were then days and then every day. I'm very fortunate. I can, not that it's a badge of honor, but I can say I never showed up to work yet with a drink in my system. I would have. I am humble enough to know that I was in such a place that even rational decision making, I was full blown delusional about my problem. And it happened within a span of such a short amount of time. And the big book does tell that in women, there is something proven that, while some of the men that sit in the rooms, I will hear men express, like, I've been drinking for 45 years and things, or I have been drinking and I didn't drink this way until now. And for me, if I do trace it back to early times, I always was a blackout drinker. One was never enough. But more than that, it became my only solution till the end. And that's really what catapulted me to my bottom.
If you're brand new listening to this, consider what Colby is saying about her solution. Because, yeah, alcohol is a problem. But for me, it was my solution to my problems. And I couldn't understand or accept life. How was I going to get through life without a drink? And I can, empathizing from your point of view, you already had this problem. You were blacking out. You had postpartum. My wife had postpartum. And as scary as it was for her, it was scary for me of seeing somebody so out of control in terms of the emotions. So I can see that, like, it worked for you. Otherwise, now you have postpartum. And plus, this is also a marker that they talk about in Joe and Charlie's around alcohol for us becomes sort of an accelerant. It makes you feel more energetic and better when it should depress you and make you sick. So if you see that of like, I've got this major issue, I know I have people who want to help me and I refuse to take their help because this thing in front of me, this bottle of beer, does help me. And you can see where that helps accelerate the problem.
Yes. And exactly. It helped until it didn't. I have so many stories, Matt, and I'm sure you do too, about, how quickly it escalated from being something that felt normal in my family. Like, we'd all be drinking on the weekends and it really wasn't like ever a problem until it was.
Yes.
How quickly that came on still to this day astounds me. I'm just so grateful I didn't give it all away because I was close.
What made you try 12 steps?
Yeah. Period. I always try to remind, it absolutely did not come from me. I wish that I could say, like, I had this great idea. About a week before I stopped digging and arrived at my bottom, I had heard of someone that I knew who was doing 12 steps. And so, like, that was the first, like, plant the seed of, like, wait, someone I know who I actually have a lot of respect for. And like, humility wasn't in my radar at that point. Like, I'm very humble when it comes to my job and my children, but like, against alcohol, I was completely an egomaniac. I can control this. I'm in control. I'm choosing this. So I heard of this person using 12 steps and I was like, oh my God. Like, in my mind, I still remember the day thinking, oh, that's so interesting. Someone like me is using this. Catapult a week forward. And my last drunk was Halloween of 21. And there's a whole story that goes with that. But the next morning, I remember going to bed that night. And for the first time, I was, not ever, but the first time in a long time, I was putting myself to bed in the sense that I was clear of thought and conscious of the shame that I felt inside of me for being the mom that was trick-or-treating with my two greatest gifts in the world, which are my children. And all I was thinking about was alcohol the whole night. And I woke up the next morning and I had this big event at work that, like, is a huge, they're like, don't you ever call in for this. And I woke up and I remember telling my husband, I was like, today is the day. I have to go. And I called into work. And this day I always mark is like the day I received the gift of desperation. Googled on my phone, like 12-step meetings around me. There was literally one, still to this day, there is one less than 3 minutes from my house. I showed up for a noon meeting. I had no idea they were an hour and a half long. I was so sick. I was crying and shaking, and I hated all the people looking at me, and everyone kept telling me, you're the most important person in the room. Just keep coming. And I wanted to crawl in a hole. And it hands down saved my life. And yeah, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. I wish I had enough willpower and all of those other things that I used to think were in my benefit to save me from alcohol. And I exhausted all those and they did not work for me. So yeah, that kind of led to my bottom.
Everybody's bottom is different.
Yeah.
There's some that have to get homeless.
Yep.
It sounds like you had that bottom of I'm not present.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, I am always and undoubtedly grateful for the people that raised the bottom for me. You know, there are so many generations and people that went before me that alcoholism was identified to be helpful, like a 12-step program for only one kind, right? Like one, a very low bottom drunk, if you will. And I am so thankful. I always say this, you know, I didn't have to, I don't say lose because I would have given it away. I had a family that was fighting for me. I have a job that is so meaningful to me. But I didn't have to give all those things away. My job, my children, my marriage, my house. You know, externally, my life looked great. And on the inside, I loathed myself, my choices, the mom I had become. And when I sit in the rooms of 12 step, that's one of the most common similarities I can collect. Our bottom really doesn't mean anything. It really is how we felt once we arrived there. And that similarity I hold so close to me.
I would say that you have a problem, or you likely have a problem. If you can control your drinking, you don't enjoy it. If you enjoy it, you can't control it. There's nothing about the amount. It's you take your first drink. What does it make you feel like? And if that is something of, I need to have more, and that's more important than anything else, it doesn't matter whether you have a job or a Lexus,
That's right.
or you're a banker or a priest or a teacher. Those things don't matter. It's how do I feel when I take in the booze? And if it's negative, regardless of how much or how much damage, that's a problem.
I would agree. Yes. Yes. Yeah. It doesn't, not the, you know, the big book talks about that. Like, there, every way that we've tried to control this, like for me, like switching drinks, switching frequencies, switching places, not at a bar, at a bar, like that's one of my favorite sections in the reading because I have done all of those things thinking those would less quantify me for the rooms of 12 step in hope that it would cure me. You know, I would go on those like sprees of like, I'm not drinking for 30 days. I'm not, and I would do those. Like I mean, I'm hard-headed. I am an alcoholic. We are really as stubborn as they come. And guess what? Day 30 in 2 hours, I would be right back at it, full speed ahead. So, but I didn't know until I knew. And it takes what it takes. You know, all those cliche sayings that people say. And for me, they're true. They're true.
What are some of the joys that you found in recovery or in 12 steps? What are the things to look forward to for other women who have to go through that hard period of time of getting sober? What are some of those joys you found?
Absolutely. I would say the number one joy, and it took a lot of work to get there. I'm going to be honest. You know, when I first got sober, I was, they'll describe it as like a pink cloud or whatever. I didn't feel that way. I felt that way my first 30 days because I finally felt like I had a solution in my palm. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything these people tell me to do. My second 30 days was miserable. I had this awareness of like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to drink again. Like, no one just teaches me how to drink like a lady. No, now it is gone for me. And so joy came in each new day, but there was also a lot of struggle. So every time I talk to like women or sponsees who are just starting, and my sponsor, I remember early on told me this. She was like, you are hard headed. Everyone's going to tell you to, and I needed someone like that. I needed someone because I could debunk anything. I was like, but what about my house? What about my job? And she's like, none of that is going to matter, honey. You're going to find yourself giving all of it away. So at the beginning, she was like, everyone's going to tell you to keep coming back. She's like, you don't. You just stay. Sit down, close your mouth, open your ears, and do everything you're told. And when I started doing that, which thankfully I'm a really good listener when it comes to that stuff, I did everything these people told me to do. And joy was easy to find. Anytime I go back in to like exercise my own will, put my hands back in the pot, grab the driver's wheel, whatever you want to call it, that's when my joy can zap quick. So for women, for me, it was like the presence of motherhood, simple things that I had given away, the laughter of my kids, the presence of fully being present at bedtime with them, cheering for my kids without a drink in the audience, like those things, the clarity that I have as a person, the trauma I've been able to unpack now that I have a clear mind. It's not easy work, but it's really the right work for me. The joy is abundant, but so are the other feelings. And now I just have other ways. I actually have a way to handle them, which is
That's
different.
the key. You got to replace the old tool that you had, and you're never going to be really successful or happy unless you have something to replace it with. I don't know if this is really hard work. Hard work is like taking boulders and smashing them. It's not the easiest. It's complex. But really, a lot of the step work stuff, it's not that hard if you're into it.
Yeah, I agree.
Going to a meeting is not that hard.
No, I love them. No, I actually think when I first got sober, I did 90 meetings in 90 days. And at the beginning, I was like, how am I going to do that? I'm a mom. I have kids. And I remember my sponsor saying, you used to replace this hour with something else. I guess your kids for 1 hour will then get to receive you sober when you get back home. And, gifts like that. And just being right-sized with myself brings me immense joy. I don't have to think that I have to hold it all, do it all, be it all to be of value. And that's a gift for an alcoholic like me.
You have these incredibly energetic TikTok lives that you do most days. What made you start doing that? And what do you get out of it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And that's very kind, Matt. I appreciate that. Sometimes you got to fake it till you feel it. And I learned through postpartum and through sobriety, the gift of solidarity, the gift of knowing you're not alone, literally upheld me on some of my hardest days, no matter if that was my community at 12-step, my therapist, my husband, my children. It doesn't matter who it is, my sisters, it doesn't matter. Knowing that I am not the only person that is feeling this exact way, without judgment, without taboo, without and so to me, when I first started going live, I didn't even know what live was. I joke about this in my lives now. I got on TikTok in the height of like COVID before I was even sober because we were all trapped at home and I was trapped at home with 2 children and trying to teach virtually. And it was a mindless escape for me at night after my kids were in bed. I didn't touch the app for years. Then I re-downloaded the app because someone had mentioned to me, like, Colby, you should really try to use your voice to extend the message of sobriety. You know, AA and 12 step and all of this, there is a huge part of anonymity, right? And I respect the principles in so many ways because thank God they were established for people like me. And so I would never air someone's business on my lives or things like that. But
Absolutely.
What'd you say?
Oh, I said absolutely. No.
Yeah. But I found that in hosting a live, it has been remarkable to me when people are like, what? I didn't know these options existed. I didn't know. And if I could even plant the seed like that person did for me the week before I hit my bottom, that was my biggest goal. If I could say to women, most of my lives are majority of women. They're majority of like moms my age with young kids. We're trying to do it all, but lessen the mental load while also trying to be ourselves and not get literally drowned in all of the things. And so a lot of my lives are about sobriety. A lot of my lives are just about solidarity and sarcasm and life on life's terms. How it started when I went, I thought this will literally be a safe place for people to unload, for people to feel seen. That's always like one of my biggest goals. And I've been really, really fortunate. I've had the privilege of connecting with a lot of people who are sober, who are not sober, who are sober curious, who work a 12 step, who are doing it on their own. However that may look, I have a really open mind when it comes to, I always say this, if I don't know what's best for me, then I definitely don't know what's best for you. And all I can do is one of my favorite authors, Dr. Jodi Carrington. She writes books about kids and she's a psychiatrist and psychologist. And she always says that all humans are looking for someone to walk them home. And to me, I don't know where home is, but I do know that I don't want to walk there by myself. I've done that before. In the isolation and the loneliness of alcoholism, it was the most miserable I've ever been. So if me getting on live a few nights a week to just be an upbeat place, but also a place that keeps it really real for people, like sometimes life sucks. Sometimes stuff is hard. And sometimes those seasons last longer than we want them to. But if I can provide just one hand to walk somebody home, then to me, it was all worth it.
I'm a firm believer that if Bill were around today, he'd have a TikTok channel. He would be doing YouTube. He'd be doing a podcast. The book, it was only the cutting edge technology of the time. And you have to meet certain people where they are. This is one of these things that fires me up going to, because I've done a lot of service when people are like, we need pamphlets. We need pamphlets, damn it. Like, no, we do not need pamphlets.
We don't need pamphlets.
We need good digital options. And this is a controversial topic of social media because it runs afoul of some traditions. But some people are never going to find another sober person unless they're flipping through doing this. And to find somebody with a great message may be the thing that helps them start becoming sober curious. It starts the path.
Absolutely.
They're not gonna run into a pamphlet to say, do I have a problem? They may not find a book in the library. That's just not how people are. But Instagram or TikTok or other social media, you may run into somebody like, oh, that's somebody like me, or I can identify with that person.
Amen.
Oh, she's a teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're craving.
Yes.
Right? As human connection drives this entire existence. And I agree. There was a lot of discourse for me when I first started. I even talked about it with my sponsor and other people in the program. And there was really mixed opinions on it. You know, I always go back to like humbly, none of us would be there without the word, without the first plant of the seed. And so no matter what that looks like and which form it comes, I'm thankful I was able to receive it. So yeah, I'm thankful that you're doing what you do, Matt. And all of the rest in your community. We need strong voices of hope. We need it because it unfortunately is, I say that it's a disease that tells us we don't have a disease, and how many people in 3.5 short years, the amount of people that I've seen come and go, and some go and not come back, is
Most people don't stick.
That is
It's
correct.
unfortunate.
It's devastating, but it also tells us the power in what we're working with. Again, it's humbling to me. Like, stay right size, honey. It's always waiting for you. So,
Without explaining it, you kind of explain the name of your account at collect.the.similarities. You're not looking for the differences. You're looking for the similarities with other people with a problem. And that is it. I never would have guessed that. And now I look at it now, I'm like, oh, this makes total sense.
yeah, it was one. I tell my sponsor all the time, I'm so glad you said that to me. She's like, I don't even remember saying it to you, but when I think of what brings me closest to humanity, my students, different groups, different belief systems, I don't care what it is. If I'm listening through the lens of similarities, I can always find a connection. I can always operate out of empathy instead of judgment.
So empathy is one of the things that I value more than anything else.
Mm,
It's in short supply nowadays.
mm,
If you reach out with empathy, if that person has the same drinking problem as you, regardless of who they are, there is something to connect to.
absolutely.
Colby, I am so grateful that you did this. You allowed me to actually take a little vacation on this episode because you had so much to say.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Well,
So much. I told my husband today, I promised myself at the beginning of 2020, I would say the next yes. I was like, for so many things I've held myself back on. And I was like, I'm going to say the next yes. And when you asked me weeks ago, I apologize. I felt terrible. Life on life's terms hit me like a ton of bricks. But I'm just so thankful that you would even ask me. And I am truly humbled and grateful. So thank you so much.
I'm always looking through of like, who's a voice that would connect? Who's a voice that I can't bring with my voice that would help somebody else? So I'm constantly looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
I think you delivered. If you didn't like this episode, something's wrong. Something's wrong with you. Like there's this nasty old timer who sits next to me all the time. He didn't like it. Well, you can go stick it. He's very focused on the traditions.
I want to fight you.
Okay. Well, violent. Well, Colby, thank you for coming on with me tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just stay, everybody. Thank you.
See everybody next week. Bye, everybody.